I want to tell you guys a story about a time I negotiated with the KingPin, and I'm going to call him Gus.
I think that you're confusing me for someone else.
Just for the sake of this story, a few years ago, a murder was committed at a place of business. This act was so heinous that it just drove a lot of tenants out. This property was in a bad market. It had high vacancies, which is typical for the market. It had no security, and the tenant mix was even worse. So it's a nightmare scenario. I came across this property, not knowing all the stuff that happened to it. I just saw a high vacancy building that I knew I could lease up. And I'm like, I could transform this property. So I had conversations with the owner to see what I can do. As soon as I got the assignment, I got inundated with calls about one problem tenant.
If you try to interfere, this becomes a much simpler matter.
Now, this particular tenant had no activity during the daytime, but at nighttime, they had a whole bunch of cars there doing stuff. Tenants that were adjacent to this tenant were scared to have their customers even come by.
I'm delighted to hear that.
I knew, as the broker in charge of this property now, they had to go. First thing I tried to do was lock the gates at night to try to stop the nighttime activity. That didn't work because they just broke the gates.
I am satisfied with the current arrangement.
At this point, I really wasn't going to try too much other stuff because I knew they had to go. So I said, well, I can either work on getting this guy evicted, which could take 6 months to a year, or I could just flat out negotiate with him to get him out of there. So I decided to confront Gus.
Is it possible for me to meet the owner?
I am the owner.
Really? How lucky for me.
So we got together. We sat down, gave each other the stare, sizing each other up.
I have invited you into my home, prepared food, so we could sit and talk, discuss what's going on in this business, like men.
I said, listen, man, I don't think your business is going to be a fit for our property anymore.
Sir, if you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system. I would be happy to refer you to our website.
And he's like, well, why? Looking surprised, like, what's going on? What have I done that leads you to believe I need to go?
I see no reason to give up an asset.
Gus, being the intelligent person he was, he started citing, well, he's following his lease. He's paying his rent. He's one of the biggest tenants in the complex. Well, yeah, he is. He's one of the biggest tenants because he scared everybody else away. So I realized I really wasn't getting where I wanted to go in the first few minutes of the conversation. So I had to paint a picture of what life was going to look like at this complex if he didn't move. And this is kind of where I put the screws a little bit to him. And I said, listen, Gus, I want you to imagine a world full of bright lights. That's what I'm putting here. I want you to imagine a world with video cameras all around that see every angle of this premise. I want you to imagine a gate that constantly gets fixed when it gets broken. And not only that, but imagine security that follows up and goes to your place of business because they saw who broke it and then starts charging you for any damages that your customers may cause. I want you to imagine a world where extreme attention to detail is paid and extreme care for the tenants here. And I want you to see if that's a world you think you'd feel comfortable in. It's very different than this world that you're in right now. So Gus sat there and he thought about it. And he said, you know what? He said, I'll get back to you.
I have your numbers.
I said, okay. Conversation was over. Not even a few days later, I got a call. He was gone. Since Gus was no longer there, the property almost transformed overnight. We got tenants recommending tenants to come into the property. The security that we did put in place was just a cherry on top because the biggest attractors of the wrong element were out of the space. So that's all I got this week. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week, Insiders.